The last few months when you've been in the studio talking about Ireland, it's been on a very positive note. Maybe not so much tonight, so Ireland, discuss.
Yeah, it's a bitter pill to swallow. You know, we had the confidence knocked out of us in round one and we never really recovered. The players have said it themselves. I think it's a combination of things. It's funny, sometimes as a player, when you're injured or you're not involved, your stock can go through the roof. And I think there's a couple of players that whose quality has really excelled. You know, sitting on the sidelines, Devon Toner.
Yep.
Set piece, you know, has really fallen apart. Our line-out's been very disappointing. And Dan Levy, a real out-and-out number 7 who was excellent in last year's Six Nations, hasn't played in this tournament. I think combined with, you know, the halfbacks not really ticking, I think we can all say that Johnny Sexton's had better periods in his career, and likewise Conor Murray. So when they're not really working in tandem with the rest of the team, it's hard to get that momentum, and it's just a bit stop-starty at the moment. I don't think it's terminal, but there's definitely plenty of work to do for the World Cup.
So where are they going into the World Cup?
Where we like it, you know, under the radar. Under the radar. Yeah. Obviously, we don't like being the hunted. So, you know, we prefer to be the hunter, and maybe, you know, we haven't dealt brilliantly as a result of being the #1 team in the Northern Hemisphere. So we got to deal with being number 2 or number 3 going into the World Cup. And, you know, all the pressure is on Wales, as we said before, and that's okay from an Irish perspective. Now the country thinks that, you know, we're dead and buried. I think that's a good footing to start from.
Should we move on to England then?
Yeah, absolutely. There was lots of incident in that game, first half, second half, and the cliche of a game of two halves. But one of the moments which was right across Twitter was that tackle from Manu Tuolangi on Sam Johnson. Potentially high, wasn't picked up on the day. What were your thoughts on it?
I think you used the word potentially, and I think you're right, Hugo. I was sitting there watching it thinking, wow, that's a big collision. But remember we had the Jerome Kano one earlier in the season with Toulouse versus Bath, and we thought, wow, that's a big collision. But we never ever saw contact, you know, with a shoulder to the head or an arm to the head. And the TMO would have been working in the background to try and get a look at that, and he's not been cited this week. Yep. So there's obviously no evidence of him actually hitting the centre in the head. So I think it's just one of those where you're sitting there as a fan going, oh my goodness, but nothing come of it.
We often talk about Premiership sides in this programme being mentally weak. I mean, do England fall into that category? Really? No, we do, don't we? Sometimes in terms of, you know, psychological.
Yeah, a little bit. And you know, I'm sure it's a bit like when your team gets knocked out of Europe and you say, well, at least we can concentrate on the league now. And, you know, Ireland are exactly the same. Well, good time for it to happen. Just before the World Cup. God, we could have gone into the World Cup thinking we were great, but there is a little bit of that. That I think, you know, speaking to some of the players, Eddie Jones, everyone would have expected the hairdryer treatment after the Scotland game. Apparently he wasn't. Apparently he's very calm. And England played some fantastic rugby, but they learned that just playing good rugby isn't enough to win in a high pressure situation. So when they get to Japan, of course they'll learn for that. Obviously, you know, harking way back to 2003, that 2003 team didn't win every Six Nations Championship. There were a lot of scars that they took into that World Cup that they learnt the lesson from. And, you know, Eddie Jones will be hoping that some of them can do that. But leadership is the area I think that they really need to get to. And it's not necessarily game plan. I felt in the Scotland game, when things started to get away from them and they, you know, that panic, sometimes when you get out to a lead and a team's coming back at you, you're thinking, how are we letting this go? But I thought they tried to do the right things. The kicking game, although the Twickenham crowd were booing a little bit, was the right thing to do, but I thought the execution was really poor. And when you're under pressure, that's when that has to be spot on to wrestle the momentum back to you.
Drico, just very quickly on Finn Russell, he was one of the major reasons why England couldn't create that momentum or take it back. How impressed have you been with him this Six Nations?
I think he's been really good in parts. Obviously, that was a spectacular, 40 minutes. You know, the quality of that pass, looping over, you know, I think it was a Slade that was shooting or May shooting in. I know he'd penalty advantage, but there's not that many 10s that can pick that pass, knowing where the player's going to be running into rather than where they are. You know, again, he got a couple of intercepts throughout the Six Nations, so he's got an eye for that. So teams are going to have to be wary. But I think it's the consistency question with Finn Russell. We know how brilliant he can be, but can he do it for 80 minutes for 4, 5, 6 games?